Welcome back to Bruised Not Broken, Life with Glanzmann Thrombasthenia, the podcast where we explore the world of Glanzmann's. For those of you joining us for the first time, Glanzmann Thrombasthenia is an exceptionally rare autosomal recessive platelet disorder characterized by a lack of glycoprotein 2b3a in platelets. This leads to significantly prolonged bleeding times. It's estimated to affect just 1 in 1 million individuals. This podcast is proudly presented by the Glanzmann's Research Foundation, and I'm your host, Taylor. I'm flying solo today as Peter had some last minute stuff pop up, but it doesn't mean that this episode will be lacking in entertainment. In this episode, we're diving deep into Robie's unique journey with Glanzmann's. Robie is a fantastic guest, and you're definitely in for a treat as we explore his life, his unique perspective on aging with GT, and the power of laughter and facing adversity. First off, Robie, thank you for rolling with the punches today. I don't think today went according to plan at all for me. Thank you for becoming our guest today.
Well, I'm honored to be here. It's rolling with the punches kind of goes along with GT because that's pretty much what we do every day.
You're not wrong at all. Nothing really ever goes according to plan when it comes to GT. So for those of our community who don't know who you are, let's start off by getting to know you, Robie, just a bit better. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am 42. I live in Kansas City, and I've had GT all my life. I was diagnosed at 9 months old. I have 2 sons and a wife, and we live in Kansas City. So the diagnosis was kind of interesting because when I was 9 months old, they were putting a boot on my foot, and the nurse was holding me down, and the next day I was black and blue everywhere. And so they did all the tests and found out I had GT.
So 9 months old, I mean, that's extremely young. Obviously, you're not really aware of what's going on. You don't remember being 9 months old. I can imagine that diagnosis, though, had an impact, especially considering, not to call you old or anything, but, wiser than some because you have more experience on this earth. It was different treatment plan back then, wasn't it? I can only imagine how your family felt when they heard that diagnosis.
Yeah, what treatment plan? When I was diagnosed, they told my parents that I was the third person they ever saw with it in St. Louis Children's Hospital. They never saw it when I had hip surgery. I'm sure we'll talk about later, but in Kansas City at 37 years old, when I had hip surgery in Kansas City, UMed told me I was the second person that they'd ever treated. I was surprised at that because it's a research hospital and, it's pretty big. But to find out that I was only the second one they've ever treated with anything was pretty impressive.
I know this because I just happen to know you personally. But for those of you who don't know, our support group in our community has been around for 20 years now. So I grew up with stories of Robie, this kid out in the Midwest who was still running track and still playing all these sports. And he just was thumbing his nose at GT and every precaution that the doctors were telling him. Everything that I've ever heard, that's kind of your personality.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, my whole life has been like an obstacle course. It's like one thing after another, and there's never anything easy. So you just roll with the punches, like we said earlier. But
Yeah.
Growing up, they were always worried. My grandma was really worried I was going to get hit with my little brother. And of course, it happened many times. I had 26 surgeries growing up on my nose. That was, for me, it was normal because, I'm going to the hospital again and going to have another surgery because that's just what happens because that was my normal. Growing up, they wouldn't let me officially play football or baseball or any contact sports. So me being competitive, I was like, well, what can I do? What will you allow me to do? And they're like, well, how about run? How about go run cross country or track or something like that? And I'm like, well, there's no ball in that. That's not fun, but you know what? I'm going to do it the best I can because I don't want to lose and I'm competitive.
Yeah.
And as I started running and as I started progressing, I started realizing that, I'm really not this good. I'm really not good at this sport. In my freshman year, I wasn't good. I was JV. I wasn't very good at all. They had a pickup race that was for anybody else that wanted to come run and support the people. So, support your team, and then you get to run too. Well, that was the turning point. That was where I had to make a decision. That race, I was dead last. And I remember the last mile or so, you go up this big hill, you circle around, and then you come down the hill to the finish line. I just didn't know what was going on because I was like, man, I've worked so hard. I've trained. I have done everything I can. What is it that I can do to get better? And I remember in that race going up a hill and just falling down because I just couldn't do it anymore. So I started crawling, crawled to the top. I got back up and I'm like, I can keep going. I can finish the race. A little further down the road, 150 meters, I fall down again. And I'm like, man, I'm so close. But no one's out there. I don't see anybody. No one's cheering me on that I know of that I could see because it was like out in the middle of nowhere. That's what cross country is. And I get back up and it's like, I gotta finish. I just gotta finish. And I get up and I finally get to run in again. And I come down the hill and I turn the corner to the finish line. My dad is still there cheering. One of my coaches was still there cheering. They knew I wouldn't quit. They knew I would finish the race. And so they cheered me on and I crossed the line. I remember my dad coming up and saying how proud he was that I finished and that I ran great. And I knew I didn't run great. I knew that. But he was so proud of me for overcoming adversities in my life already and
Yeah.
doing everything I could do to be better. And he saw me training. He saw me doing everything. He's like, there's something wrong. I don't know what it is, but there's something wrong. Like, you work too hard to be where you're at. And he's like, I mean, it comes to a point where it's either maybe this isn't your sport. Maybe we don't do this, but I think we gotta get you checked out. And that was the turning point because little did I know, I mean, yeah, I knew I was kind of anemic, but little did I know that when I went to the hospital that they checked my iron level and my iron level was 3. I can't remember. Normal is what, 80 to 100 and something.
It's something like that. Yeah.
I was at
Not
3.
not three. Yeah.
Now, I did have some other things I knew was going on that I didn't tell anyone because that's not how I do it. I just roll with the punches. I was passing out. If I stood up too quick, I'd have to hold on to something and I'd black out. You get the fuzzies like a old black and white TV, it'd be
Yeah.
fuzzies. You feel lightheaded and you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna fall out. And there's multiple times I would go in my room, open the door, fall down on my bed, and wake back up. That was the year I started changing. I started taking iron, and back
You're
then it wasn't easy. I was 15, 14, 15. I couldn't just go to the hospital and get an iron infusion or anything. Or if I could, they didn't tell me back then. And so they put me on iron tablets, and I had been supposed to be on iron tablets my whole life. I never liked them for obvious reasons, but I started taking them. They told me to take a couple weeks off, and I'm like, I don't take weeks off. I mean, I have to go run. But so a year later, as a junior, I went from running 34:25. I went back and I was on varsity the next year and ran, it was like 17:26 or something like that. So I cut my time in half. And that's where my running career really took off by sophomore track season. So it was just crazy that my body was so deprived of iron that as soon as I started taking it, everything started working.
Did they have any theories as to how, like, were you having joint bleeds? Or, I mean, I know even to this day, doctors try to say that GT patients don't have joint bleeds, but I mean, were there any bleeds that were happening that you could connect the dots as to
Yeah.
why your iron was so low?
For me, I just had nosebleeds all the time, and
Okay.
it was
And
just,
that's where these surgeries came in.
and I would just constantly have surgeries. Now, when I got older, I started being able to take care of myself a little better and try to keep it as moist as possible and not have as many bleeds. But other things would happen, like because I wanted to play other sports too, I'd go hang out and I'd play baseball and play football, and me and my brother would wrestle, and I'd be black and blue, so I'd get bruises too. But as we progressed with my running career, like the second graduated high school and went to college, and I came back to Farmington, and during that freshman year of college is where I believe I first met your mom. And I didn't really meet her, but I like talked to her a little bit, and she got in contact with my stepmom somehow. I don't know how they found each other, but then she started telling me stories about Julia, and it was just like, wait a second, there is someone else out there with this, because I come from a small town and there was like no one. No
Yeah.
one knew it. Go to the hospital, like, what is it again? And you have to tell them everything. And so we would just go to St. Louis and go to Children's. But when I first heard, I'm like, okay, I went through the hardest part, I think, of GT, and now there's another little girl in Georgia that is having these issues. What can I do to help?
Yeah.
Like, I want to help. What can I do? Because I want her to have a better life than I did. And at the time, all I could do was run. And so that's when we started the Fearful Holidays run. And
You're gonna make me cry now because I still have that T-shirt, the long sleeve T-shirt. We
hmm
used to we were the kids who would fight over our parents like T-shirts and sweatshirts to sleep in.
hmm
And the minute mom got that T-shirt from y'all, it was like the prized possession of the three of us. Yeah, we fought over that. And I, not to pat myself on the back, but I might have possession of the shirt now. So I'm the
uh
ultimate winner. But Dr. Wilcox has one.
yeah, we sent him one. That's where we found out about his research too, and that's why we started raising money and just sending it in. I don't remember how much we actually raised. It wasn't a whole lot, but it was something. We did it 3 straight years, and I had a good friend help me put it on. His name was Brad Coker, and
Yeah.
he did all the background stuff and the behind the scenes things, and made it happen. And I just basically showed up and raced and invited people, and it was a lot of fun.
I do remember that either it was advice from your stepmom, but your story was the first one where cauterization was a no-go for nosebleeds because it was something that kept being brought up for Julia because she had just as many nosebleeds as you did when she was younger. And there were some that they just couldn't get to stop. And they wanted to cauterize every single time. And I just remember when my parents pushed back, the the response they got from the doctors was, we don't know that will happen. And my mom, I just remember being like, no, no, I know somebody personally where this has happened and we're not risking that. So when
Yep.
you go in and you cauterize, you're fixing the problem now. But if you're having 26 of them done, what I mean, what's the potential negatives?
They did that a little bit, and then they quickly realized maybe we shouldn't do this. And they constantly packed my nose a lot. And over time, I developed a little hole in the septum. They were like, well, what can we do? Do we just let it go, or find a way to put something in there to, like, keep the nostrils separate? And so they decided to come up with what they called a button. And all my life it was, hey, let's put this in. And when they put it in, it was basically a little, started little because my nose was little, and then as I grew, the hole would get bigger. Well, they used to stitch the button to the septum, and they found out that was killing the septum, and it would deteriorate the septum, and the hole would get bigger. So then they started stitching the button to itself, and it would stay in there better. And the only problem was if my nose was dry and I got hit on it, it would scratch the inside of my nose. Next thing you
And
know, back to hospital, back to surgery because blood clots would get between them and it would just push the button out of place. I remember one time I had a surgery on a Monday because surgery days were Mondays and Wednesdays. I still remember them. And I'd have them on a Monday. And this one particular time was the only time I really remember getting platelets as a little kid.
mhm,
And this time they ran it long, and so it stuck out my nose. And you can tell right here, I got little creases here.
mhm.
That was from that time when the button stuck out like a half an inch, and it was out for like a week like that to see if it was going to shift again. The next week I came back and the bleeding had stopped and everything, and they had cut it back to where it tucked back in my nose, and I was good to go for a while till I got hit or whatever the next time. But it was like you never knew when I went there what they were gonna do. Like they tried so many things back then. They did the whole cocaine thing. They
It,
tried that on me, and all I know is it didn't help me. And my parents told me that I was a crazy man. Like I don't know what happened, but they said all I wanted to do was run down the hallways. I wanted to get on the elevator, ride the elevator up and down. I jump up and down, jump up and down. I was just like going nonstop
oh
throughout the
my
hospital.
gosh. Who had to deal with you jacked
Yeah,
up on liquid cocaine?
yeah. They were great. Julie always took care of me. It was like my little mini vacation. I just show up
Yeah.
and I knew, hey, this is what's going to happen this day. I get to go down the playroom, paint porcelain things. I get to play video games on the old school computers.
Yeah.
St. Louis Cardinals. Fred Bird would come every once in a while. WWF was in town one weekend when I was there, and I got two autographed pictures. I basically lived in that hospital for 18 years.
One of the things that I think is a trigger word, especially for those of us who've been in the community for such a long time, is when somebody is like, I just want my child to feel normal. Obviously, that's our trigger word. And I think it's because ultimately nobody's really normal. Like everybody has stuff going on, but just because you have GT doesn't mean that you've never let it hold you back. And I'm not saying that other people do, but I'm saying that you are probably one of the best examples of just giving a big old middle finger to GT your entire life and being like, you know what, I'll deal with the consequences later. I absolutely love that about you. And there's a couple of people in the community who I always call them my redheaded, like the redheaded stepchildren of the group,
Mm-hmm.
because y'all are the wild kids. You like the doctors will tell you, and you're like, okay, cool. So, do you know how to fix it if I mess it up? Because as you get older, I mean, does it get easier? Or do you just learn how to deal with it better?
Well, I'm still learning. It's always been improvise and overcome. You can't let anything defeat you or you'll live in a bubble. And living in a bubble is no life at all. Life, you got to have fun. You can't just sit back and watch everyone else have fun because that's not healthy either. So that's why I decided to take the bull by the horns and be smart about things. Always
Air
happen,
quotes for everybody who can't see
right?
him.
Uh, it doesn't always happen because it's like, you know what? I know I shouldn't do this, but I really want to. And I'm going to. I'm going to try it. I'll just try just a little bit and just see, right? Just a little bit. We'll just see if it's okay.
What's the worst
And
that could
usually the
happen?
first time, it doesn't. It was not bad. Second time, you're like, oh crap, I probably shouldn't be doing this. Since I've grown older, I don't run anymore. Like run. I graduated college. I paid for my college. I was very successful. I feel, especially overcoming GT, it did hinder me running because of the lack of iron or the roller coaster of my hemoglobin. If my hemoglobin numbers were good, then I was a very tough runner. But if they weren't, then I would just fall back to second, third place on the team or whatever. One bad nosebleed, and cross country season was in the winter time, so it was drier. So I did bleed more in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
And once it turned cold, then that's usually when I had my first nosebleed, like tough one of the college career. And it's like, okay, how long is it going to be till I'm normal? I got so many weeks until I'm ready to go. But I would get back and I would go out there and give it all I had. Another thing that happened, I was training. I never had rolled my ankle my whole career, ever. Like I'd roll it, but it wasn't bad. This time it was bad. I did it on a Thursday, warming up for a workout, rolled it, and I'm like, I go down and I'm like, what just happened? Like, I couldn't believe it. I looked at my ankle. My ankle was like the size of a basketball. It was huge. Okay, maybe not that big, but it was huge.
I can imagine though that
I
it
couldn't, yeah,
was pretty
it
big.
swelled
Yep.
up. It was big. I couldn't walk. I was like, what's going on here? This is not good. They go get the coach. They get the cart. They wheel me in. They're like, man, this is not good at all. You're not gonna be able to go because we were leaving. That was on a Thursday. We were leaving Friday to go to this race in South Dakota, and I'm like, coach, I have to run tomorrow because we just fallen out of the rankings. And he's like, dude, you're gonna stay by. You can't go. And I'm like, what'd you say? Did you say can't? And so I went down there Friday morning,
That was
and I showed up Friday morning. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, coach, we just fell out of the rankings. I have to go run. And he's like, you can barely walk. Like, you can't run a 5 mile race. I'm like, yes, I can. He's like, okay, you're going to have to go down the trainer. You're going to have, if they tape you up, you're going to have to prove to me that you can run without a noticeable limp. I'm like, a noticeable limp? So we go down, they tape me up, and the whole time the trainer, he's just like, are, are you serious? You're gonna try to run with this? So I go and we race and we beat, I don't know, I can't remember what the place we got. We got third or fourth. I just remember crossing the finish line and I was in so much pain. And I just crossed the finish line and I just went down. And a couple of my teammates came and picked me up, took me out of the way, and just like, dude, I don't understand how you just did that, but that was a heck of a race.
your parents say when you told them about that? Because this was at
It,
college, right?
this was at college. Yeah, they were. I mean, it didn't shock them. They were like,
Yeah.
"Well,
Yeah.
that sounds like something you do." Um,
Are you
but it was,
okay? Yeah.
you okay? Yeah. Well, good race. So,
How long
um,
was the recovery on that?
it was a noticeable couple weeks. I mean, I didn't not run. I kept running, just loosened it up. You know, I did take it easy, but it wasn't, hey, I'm not gonna run today. It
Yeah.
was ice bathing it all the time. And I remember going down there 2 or 3 times a day just to get it better. Since then, I still play stuff I'm not supposed to. I still play softball. I got hopefully a championship to go in tonight, but we'll see about that. League championships. But no, I mean, I've had numerous injuries on the ball field.
I was gonna say, since just in the past couple of years, being your friend on Facebook stresses me out
Yeah.
because when it's softball season, I think at least once every 2 weeks there's a new injury that you're like, well, did this today.
So I've always loved baseball growing up, and I was never allowed to play it. So as soon as I graduated college and I got married, I'm like, can I go play softball? So we had a little church team, and that's what got me started
Yeah.
in softball. And then it kind of took over my life for a little bit, where I was playing 2 or 3 nights a week, and then playing all weekend, a couple weekends a month. And
That's just out of the blue, you becoming so passionate about sport.
yeah, there has been quite a few injuries with it. I started out in the outfield and I broke a rib diving and jumping over a fence. I broke my wrist diving after a ball in the middle of February. As I got older, I started tearing hamstrings and calf muscles. The real injuries started happening. One day in December, I was out at a tournament and I took a swing, tried to run out of the box, and I kind of stumbled I didn't fall down, but I knew something happened. I thought it was my back, went to chiropractor for a while. Insurance denied me multiple times for an MRI. I went through physical therapy. Chiropractor tried to get an MRI, they denied it. I went through 6 weeks, came in one day on crutches, and my physical therapist was like, dude, I don't know, but I can't walk. And for me to say, I can't walk,
It's bad.
he's like, oh, this isn't good then. There's something
Hmm.
major wrong. I'm not touching you until we figure out what's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
He got denied for an MRI too. And then they sent me to a back specialist. They denied them. Finally, they pushed it through. They MRI'd my back. They're like, oh, well, the good news is your back looks great. The bad news is we need a second MRI because we think it's your hip. I was 37 at this time, still playing ball, still doing all that. Comes April, I played a tournament, came home, and then drove to St. Louis for Easter. Got to St. Louis, got out of the car. I can't walk again.
Pair of crutches, of
Got
course.
to, got to. And so I had them, took them there. My wife was kind of mad at me for showing up so late on Easter. And then I woke up the next morning. I'm like, honey, I can't move. She's like, well, you played ball all day yesterday. I'm sure you can walk enough to go to church with us and all that stuff. And I'm like, I'm really trying, but I really can't. But I can't. And little did we know that I had a broken hip.
So it
Yeah,
was broken the entire time.
yes. So I had AVN, avascular necrosis, where I lost blood flow to my joint, my bone. The
Mm.
bone started dying. So it had probably already died. And then in December, it fractured. By the time we got the MRI in April, it had already collapsed. So my bone wasn't round anymore. It was like a half moon shape. And the top had just collapsed on top of each other. And it was very painful, but self-employed, improvise, overcome, kept working, kept playing when I could. We had just started this new team and I had to do what I had to do. And so little I know that October 2018, I had my first surgery.
Well, it was a hip replacement, right?
It was a full hip replacement at
Yep.
37. First time they were really cutting on me, I guess you could say. All my other surgeries, they never really cut on me.
Yeah.
And this was a very stressful, nervous time. I had two boys. So for me, it was like, I'm going to be all right, right? Yeah, I'm going to be all right. I can do this.
Yeah.
And in the back of my mind, they're always thinking, I hope I'm going to be all right
Yeah.
because I have a wife and two boys that depend on me, and I just have to be okay. My oldest one was in third grade, so he was probably 8. And so we do consults, make a plan, talk to hematologists, and wound up using platelets. I'm one of those that have never had Novo 7. It's always been platelets and blood and iron infusions. Is I had 1 unit of platelets before surgery, and I told the surgeon I bleed. I'm really good at bleeding, so be ready. He's like, oh, we'll be fine. In and out, 45 minutes to an hour, no big issues. So we had the first unit. I had checked. I was doing good. It was like 14 before the surgery.
Which, by the
Um,
way, those are like pro numbers for
yeah.
hemoglobin, guys.
hmm
Like,
Yeah.
I'm impressed,
I was like feeling good. And the crazy thing, like two
right?
weeks earlier, I was like at 15.9. I'm like, man, I'm feeling
Oh
great.
yeah, you were like, heck
And
yes, let's
then,
have this surgery.
right. And so something happened for like 2 weeks before surgery. That I don't know what, but I went from like 15.9 to like 14.2. And I'm like,
Yeah.
just another day in the walk in the park kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, after that, we do surgery, and my surgery was supposed to be like 8 o'clock in the morning or something like that. Well, the next thing you know, it's like, oh, well, you're going at noon. Well, so I go back in the back, and everyone's still in the waiting room, and it's no longer noon. It's 2 o'clock, and then it's 3 o'clock, and I'm like, why? Like, people are going in, people are going out. Everyone's having surgeries, but not Robbie. He's just sitting there waiting. And my only thinking is, okay, they're scared of what's going to happen. So they're putting me at the end
Yeah.
of the day. And little did I know that I'm guessing that had to be the plan.
Yeah,
So
somebody was like, "Are you sure that you can get this done in an
yeah.
hour?"
And so I just sat back there, prepped and waiting, had my platelets, and then going to surgery at like 3 o'clock or something like that. Well, 6 hours later, I showed up in my room.
Oh, I
Apparently,
remember
I
you
was
telling
in
me this.
surgery for like, I went from a hemoglobin of 14ish to low eights, and I was still dropping. So if it dropped all the way down to 7, which I was still like, seven's not bad. I'm all right. I could do this. But I was getting pretty like lethargic because I hadn't been that low in a long time, and I was older. I was 37, so that was not the best thing for me. But I was in the funny thing was like, oh, it's a hip surgery now, and back then it was like, hey, you come in on Monday, have the surgery, you stay Tuesday, you go home Wednesday. You'll be in and out in 3 days. I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. Now it's, hey, you come in, have surgery, and you're out. Like
Outpatient.
today.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I went in on a Monday, had surgery. I was there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And I got to home with Monday. So I was basically there 8 days. It was really a roller coaster of the hemoglobin and watching my blood go down and then stop and then start to slowly creep back up. I think when
Yeah.
they let me go, I had 3 units of platelets, and they had iron infusions for 5 straight days to try to get me pepped up, I guess.
What happened? Was it just you bled so much during surgery, or did you have a bleed that didn't heal after the surgery?
So that I'm not really sure on.
Okay.
I didn't. I think this is all me making
Yeah.
this up in my mind because I don't know really, but I think I bled a lot in
Yeah.
surgery, and I know the surgeon. Well, I know the surgery had to have had some like conflicts because it took so long. So I don't know really the details of what was in there. I mean, they never really told me
Yeah.
anything that happened, but I was in there way too long. I bled way too much, and they got me stitched back up. They gave me Amicar, I believe, out after surgery. I had a unit of platelets after, and then the iron infusions. But that took a long time to recover from. But I have something to compare it with now because I've had the other hip done,
Yeah.
and it was night and day. Like
Yeah.
from the surgeon to hospital, other than the
Right.
second hospital trying to give me blood thinners. I think I called you that day too.
You were like, hold on.
Hematologists, they're trying to give me, not my hematologist. This hospital is trying to give me blood thinners, and I'm telling them, do not give me blood thinners. I'm like, no, everyone has them. I'm like, I'm not everyone. And they're like, well,
Yeah.
our hematologists, they've seen lots of GC patients. I'm like,
Nope.
you have no
Don't
idea
trust
what you're
you.
talking.
Don't trust
Well,
you
I called.
immediately.
Yeah, the second hip surgery was phenomenal, and this is the
Yeah.
one I had to, you know, I was in. Great doctor. Uh, he was like, I was the first one in Kansas City to be doing these. I got you. We'll be fine. Walked in, felt comfortable. This time they gave me 2 units of platelets before, and then I had needed nothing else. Like he was
But
in and
you,
out. 42 minutes, I think, is what he told me, and he was done.
yeah.
And it was just that hip, the left hip feels way better than the right still, even though it's new. But the right one took so long for me to recover because I lost so much blood.
Yeah.
The second one, I was like, man, I think I could play ball today.
I actually
But
think I remember you making a joke like that, like within days of you being
yeah,
home from surgery. But I can assume that the anxiety probably quadrupled before the second hip surgery, just
it
because
did.
of how bad the first one. I went not necessarily bad, but unexpectedly the first one went.
Right. I was definitely more nervous the second time. I was 5 years older, I guess. I was 44 years older. So Yeah. So I was definitely a little more nervous.
Your kids
Um,
were old enough to
Kids are
understand.
older. They understand now. My first surgery, my oldest one, he was kind of old enough to understand, and
Hmm.
he was so scared. He thought I was gonna die. He really did.
Yeah.
He came to the hospital. He curled up in my bed, didn't want to leave. He was just so worried because I was in there for 8 days. The second one, I was more worried than anyone else because it's like, okay, I survived this once. I think I'm pretty tough, but I just don't know what tomorrow has anymore because
Yeah.
you just don't know. And I was nervous. I tried to play it off as it wasn't because that's what I do.
Yeah. I got this.
Just
No
another
big
day.
deal. Yeah.
Improvise and overcome. So, uh, but I knew I was in good hands with the surgeon, and I just trusted him and trusted the medical team, and it came through. I was in and out of surgery, and a couple hours was from the time it started to the time it ended. The surgery itself was only 45 minutes, 42, I think is what he said. And I was stitched up, minimal bleeding. He said it was one of the smoothest ones he's done. And it just went, everything lined up perfect. The platelets did their job, and the speed of the physician definitely helped the second
Yeah.
time. And so in the hospital for 3 days, almost like a normal person,
Almost.
almost.
You
But
didn't get blood thinners, so you're not quite normal.
right. So the only reason really they held me for the 3 days was because we wanted to make sure they were checking my levels, and we're just going to
Yeah.
hold you just in case you have any post surgery bleeding, and we don't want to send you home prematurely. But I was great. I was up, and I mean I was walking, but you know I wasn't like running. I had to have a walker and all that fun stuff. So that's kind of that adventure, and since then I've been pretty good on not hurting myself. Other than, the typical take a 100-mile-an-hour softball to the shin.
I was about to say, yeah, such malarkey because you have been injured since then. Just
Those
not
are
and
minor.
nothing. Well, so how old were the boys when you first like was it something that y'all always talk to them about? Like, hey, dad has this thing. Like, as of right now with my boys, they're 7 and 5. They just know Aunt Julia has a bleeding disorder, and it means we just have to be careful around her. Is that kind of the approach that y'all did, or did you wait until they were a certain age before really talking about it?
I don't remember like really sitting down and talking to them about it other than before the surgery.
Right.
And we talked to my oldest one and told him everything. I mean, he knew I like bruised all the time and all that, but
Right.
he was still not old enough to really understand all of it.
Hmm.
And still now, I mean, he'll ask questions and I'll tell him, and we wrestle. It's fun for now, but he's getting big and
I was about to say
I'm getting old. But
he's a
I still gotta let
teenager
him know. I
now.
still gotta let him know. He's 13 and he's very athletic and he's pretty strong. So
Yeah.
it's kind of I got my days are numbered before I can't wrestle him anymore. But I still gotta let him know who dad is. So
Yeah.
my youngest one, he's like the life of the party. So he's not. I mean, he's athletic and stuff too, but he's just not. He's not my competitive clone, if that makes
Right.
sense. My oldest one, he's me. He's me without GT.
Oh my gosh.
So
Oh
it's gonna
my
be fun to watch
goodness.
him in
Yeah.
high school and college and whatever he chooses to do. But yeah, it's crazy when you have kids like you see your personality in them. You know what they're going to do before you do it because that's what you would have done,
Yeah.
and it's just interesting. Yeah, so that's kind of cool.
Well, so I feel like with guys it's different than with girls, right? Like with guys with GT, having kids is always still on the table. Whereas with like girls, it's not necessarily it some can, some can't, right? But no matter what, it will end up being intense. Did you and Allie, before having kids, did you do any type of genetic counseling or anything? Was it one of those, this is so rare, we're not really that concerned about it? Or, you know,
Well,
you're smiling.
we had we've had two babies that are miracles. They really
Right.
are. When we tried to have Tucker, like we couldn't get pregnant, and then we got pregnant through having help, and we lost our first one. We tried again, we miscarried the second one, and then finally we got Tucker, and we at that time we were like, we hope he's we hope he's normal,
Right.
but even if he isn't, like,
Yeah,
who else better to have him than me? Like,
that's so true.
I can take care of him. I can do it. And we just wanted a kid so bad that it's like, you know what? If it happens, then we'll deal with it then. We'll roll with the punches.
Right.
We'll do it. But we did have him tested after he was born to see, and obviously he's a carrier, but he got the good gene from his mama. So, and the same with my youngest. We never had him tested, but he's 10 now and
And never shown any
no
symptoms. Yeah.
signs. It was very hard for me because all I can give them is GT. That's all I have. And I just wanted to have a child that could play sports, that could do whatever he wanted to do. And it happened, but it was so scary going through that time because we didn't ever have her tested to see if she was a carrier or anything. We just did it, and he came, and didn't find out if he was a boy or girl. We had names picked out, and we just enjoyed the time. When he came out, we're like, man, looks like a Tucker to me, and
Oh,
named him right there, and the rest is history. But yeah, it was crazy times from a guy's perspective. Always in the back of your head, hey, what if?
yeah.
Because we know, I mean, it's not like, hey, I have a good gene and a bad gene. No, I have both of them. They're both bad. They're both terrible. So the best I could give them is not good. So we knew the risk going in, and we decided, we're gonna roll the dice and go with it because that's just what we wanted.
Well, and like you said, even if one of the boys had had GT, who better to parent him than somebody who has grown up with it and who knows how to manage it on themselves.
Yep.
So, I, and I like that perspective on it a lot because if you think about it in a way of like, if your parents didn't have GT, right? They had no preparation whatsoever. And, but you have some. So I like that perspective a lot. And I think that will sink in with a lot of men dealing with GT because I think men are very hard on themselves when it comes to taking care of their family and having kids and stuff where not that women don't, but you shoulder a lot of the responsibility if something doesn't go right. But then you internalize that. Even us just talking about this now just shows that I mean, it is okay. Like it's okay for certain things not to end up okay. And then when they do end up okay, like, oh my gosh, like how much more amazing is that? So, yeah, I'm just so proud of you. Like, I'm not trying to be cheesy or anything, but I am. I'm just so proud of you because it's it's not easy having GT. It's not easy. I mean, it's not easy being as and I don't want anybody who listens to this think that you're selfish or anything like that because this your competitiveness, your wanting to go out there and play sports and everything, you can't help that. Like that is part of who you are. And if you were to even try to lock it away, I mean,
It
I
wouldn't
don't
be
want to
healthy.
imagine how, yeah, like,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
like
So you've made
from
it work for you.
like
And
with cross country back then, it was like that was my way to escape reality. Like I could go out and I could go for a run and I could go push my body to the limits and I could forget about home life. I could forget about everything else that was going on that might not have been so good. And it was just me and the pavement and it was just me out there doing me.
yeah.
And nothing could stop me but me. And that's I mean, that's the same thing. I gained so much of my confidence as a person through sports and being able to, even though when I was failing at sports, it was like I'm still gaining confidence because I know I'm putting the work in and
Hmm.
one day I will see the results.
Right.
And and that goes for any of us and anything we do. Like you can't quit. You can't just stop doing things because it's not working. If
Right.
you truly want to do something, if you truly love something, you have to work hard for it. That's marriages, that's jobs, that's athletics. If you truly love it, you have to work hard for it. And don't let anyone get in your way of telling you that you can't do it. You control you. And one day, you know, I'm going to look back and be like, you know what? I just can't play ball anymore. I can't do it physically. And that's when I'll have to step away. And, but luckily right now, it's like I'm getting there. I'm close to like, I'm just sit back and watch my kids now. And because it's so much fun watching those boys go out there and just play ball. And they both play soccer. My oldest one runs cross country.
They're super smart kids. They play soccer. Absolutely. Only the best sport in the world.
Yeah,
Well, we also know though, like if the day that you have to like step away from softball, I honestly see you just like redirecting that focus into something that doesn't require you to move around too much. So, like in 5 years, I I fully expect that like Robbie is the Midwest champion of cornhole or something. Like,
uh,
just or of ping pong. Like, yeah, I because
you never
first it was
know,
running, then it was
right?
softball, and I don't see you stopping. You
You
got
never know. We shall see. I
well,
might just sit back and enjoy being a dad and watching the boys play for a while, and then maybe when I'm 50, I'll make a comeback.
come out of retirement.
Come out of it.
Well, so we always ask this question in every single episode. It's kind of become a tradition. If you were to talk to your younger self today, what would you tell him about what the future looks like?
Hmm. Well, it's bright. It's always bright. So I would always like as a young, as an old GT patient to a younger one, I would say I can look back on my life now and know, had I done A, B, and C, my life would have been a little better. Had I taken a little bit better care of myself as a younger person with GT, because I was a little rebel, I guess you could say. Um, Now I'm not saying don't do everything I did, but I'm saying, hey, take care of your nose a little better, all that stuff. And um, with technology now, it's a lot easier too to make sure iron levels are up, to make sure your blood counts look good, and by doing those kinds of things, um, athletically, I would have been that have been a better route back then. So if you look in the future, whatever. But in general, everything else though is, you know, keep having fun, keep living like you want to live, not that you are in a bubble. Like, don't ever stop believing that you can do something that people tell you can't. Just keep trying and put the work in, and the results will happen. And that applies to everything in life, relationships, sports. Put the work in, and the results will come.
So, in closing, I do want to extend another massive thank you to you. You were You didn't know what a podcast really was before this.
I did not. I mean, I heard about them before, but
I mean,
I have not.
showed your showed your age a little bit.
I did try to like listen to a couple of years earlier today. Like
Yeah.
I was like 2:30. I'm like, I gotta figure this out real quick. And I listened to a little bit of the one from Boston. I'm like, oh, okay, I think I got the hang of this.
Yeah, it's nothing too scary. And
Yeah.
you did good, kid. You did
You know,
good.
I guess you can teach an old dog new tricks.
For everybody, I do encourage you to visit our website at www.curegt.org. You can also connect with us on Facebook. You can reach out to us via our CureGT website. And we're also extremely proud of our amazing support group on Facebook, which now we have around 830 members. It is an absolute testament to the incredible strength and solidarity of our community who happen to be scattered throughout the entire world. Everyone in this group is welcoming and understanding, and they make it just an incredible safe space. And also, as I always say at the very end, remember, while you might be one in a million, you're definitely not alone.